Back to that breaking news in Hong Kong. These are live pictures right now. This is the Hong Kong International Airport. You are looking at protesters clashing with riot police there. Also a number of international reporters on the ground as well. This is an airport where operations have been suspended for all flights. You're looking at some of the aftermath of the clashes, violent clashes. These are protesters. This has been going on now for roughly 2 months there in Hong Kong. The protesters there are demanding, among other things, the resignation of the territory's leader. They're also demanding elections for her successor as well, and the release of some folks who were arrested in earlier protests, and an investigation into police use of force as well. Our correspondent in that part of the world is Janice Mackey-Frayer. She joins me now. She's on the phone. She's at the airport, I'm told. Janice, what are you seeing where you are?
Well, we've seen a shift in the mood and in the landscape here in about the last 30 minutes. Thousands of protesters have been here all day. They've been occupying both the departure and the arrivals levels, using trolleys, suitcases, whatever they can to try to block the way. That's what forced authorities to close down the airport yet again for a second day. Unprecedented. This is one of the world's busiest hubs. What we've seen now in the last 30 minutes or so is the arrival of a lot of flashing lights. There are police buses that are lined up all outside. There is the expectation that they're going to move in with a degree of force. There had already been some officers that came in, and we saw those clashes. So there is an intensification of what has been brewing here over several hours. There was also, for quite some time, the crowd was quite riled up because they believed they had discovered two undercover, who they claimed to be Chinese police officers, that were disguised as protesters in the crowd. So they detained, for lack of a better word, these two officers, and that really that got the crowd going a lot. So there is the expectation now. Fire department's just walking past me as we speak. There is the expectation that the authorities are moving in to shut this down. It wasn't expected that Beijing was going to let this linger for much longer, and there have been a lot of signals in Chinese state media suggesting that this was going to end. I see now that some of the protesters are taking barricades, whatever they can find. They're piling them up on the ramps that people use to come into the airport. You have to remember there are still some passengers that are here. They've been lingering around hoping that some flights will be posted on the board. So those people are now trying to figure out how they can get out of the airport as they see the scene around them changing quite drastically.
Janice, stand by for me if you can, and if you are in some place that is safe as well, do stand by for me there at Hong Kong International Airport. I want to bring in our chief global correspondent, Bill Neely, who is also watching all of this unfold. He's been following this story as well. Bill, for folks who may not have been following the story as closely, what precisely are these protesters? What are they looking for? What do they want?
Well, I think at the very heart of what they've been looking for the last number of weeks is that China honors Hong Kong's special status. It is one country and two systems, and initially their protests came about because China wanted to be able to extradite anyone they liked from Hong Kong virtually for any reason. Now, after the initial rounds of protests, China backed off. They've suspended that request or that proposed law, but they haven't got rid of it altogether, and they haven't addressed one of the things the protesters dislike most, which is the heavy-handed, as they see it, the heavy-handed actions of the police. So the Chinese, once again, have not set up any kind of inquiry into the police actions over the last few weeks. So week by week, the protests have become more and more violent, certainly. You know, when the Chinese, when Beijing says that these are riots, you know, they have a case. And what you're looking at now is two things. This is a really important event, but it's also a symbolic event. Hong Kong Airport, one of the world's busiest airports. That's exactly why the protesters went there, to make this, if you like, a global event. I was there several weeks ago when they were protesting outside the Hong Kong main legislative office. This will have reverberated around the world, if you like. And Beijing knew that as well, and they knew that at some point they would have to stop what was going on at the airport, because flights were being cancelled and it was getting, you know, worldwide attention. So they've moved in, and I think on both sides you're seeing an increase in the amount of force both consider acceptable. You know, even 4 or 5 weeks ago when I was there, the protesters were not, by and large, were not throwing bottles, throwing Molotov cocktails, throwing stones. They are now, and the police were very reticent to use tear gas and fire, rubber bullets. They're not now. They're doing it quite openly, and you can see on your screen the picture to the right. You know, the police beating protesters. Many of them were in plain clothes and they moved in. The protesters, you know, didn't know who was one of them and who was in the police. So I think we're seeing an escalation in this dispute by both sides, and I don't think, Craig, it's going to end here. I mean, it does look like they are determined to clear this airport, but I think the protesters will simply move on somewhere else. So we haven't seen the end of this.
We are, again, for folks who are just joining us here, we are approaching 11:30 on the East Coast here in the United States of America. But these are live pictures. Hong Kong International Airport. It is roughly, not exactly sure what time it is there, Bill, but this is 11:30 p.m. Excuse me, it's there on the screen. They are 12 hours ahead. But you are looking at live pictures of protesters clashing with police.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.